There are two pillars of Western philosophy, Plato and Aristotle. This is Plato pointing his finger up to the sky, and the other is Aristotle facing his palm to the ground. Aristotle was Plato's student. Although he presented a philosophy that contradicts Plato's thoughts, he was still under the influence of Plato. In that sense, all of Western philosophy can be said to be under Plato's influence. That is why the 20th century English philosopher Alfred North Whitehead said, "European philosophy consists of footnotes to Plato." If we take Whitehead's words to be entirely true, Western philosophy began with Plato, and it developed with the arguments over whether Plato was right or wrong. So we can say that we're still doing philosophy within the framework that Plato created. Then what is that framework? That is the story for today. Imagine people trapped in a cave. They're tied up and can't even look back. Behind them are torches, and between the prisoners and the torches, there's a high wall. And behind the wall, some people come and go with models of objects or animals. So the people who are tied up can only see the shadows of the models created by the torch. They have been tied up in the cave since birth, so they think that the world of shadows they see is the real world. Then one day, one man is released from the chains, and he goes out of the cave. Since it is his first time out of the cave, his eyes are blinded and he can't see anything. But as time goes by, he will be able to see objects and animals in reality. And he can see the moon and the stars and then the sun. Then he will realize that what he has seen in the cave until then are not real objects. They're the shadows of things. So he goes back into the cave, and he says to the person next to him,
"Hey, what you're looking at is a shadow. The real thing isn't like that. I'll show you outside."
Then would people say,
"Oh really? Let's get out of here."
No, they would say,
"What? Are you crazy? Don't you see that over there? Doesn't make sense that something so vivid is a shadow?"
and even if they are freed, they wouldn't think of going out of the cave. In the allegory, the inside of the cave is a fake world, and the outside of the cave is the real world. The inside of the cave is the world we live in, and the outside of the cave is the world of ideas. Inside the cave is a visible world, experienced by human senses. Outside of the cave is an intelligible world that is recognized by human reason. Plato's argument is this: the world experienced by senses is fake. The world of ideas, which is recognized by reason, is real. The man who left the cave is the philosopher. The philosopher is someone who saw the world of ideas, the real world. He comes back into the cave and tries to take everyone out into the real world along with him. But people don't believe the philosopher. They choose to remain in the cave, believing it to be the real world. Now let's explain Plato's cave with the movie Matrix. In the distant future, there comes a world where machines dominate humans. The machines keep humans in incubators and use them to get energy. They even plug data lines directly into people's brains and show them a made-up world, the world of Matrix. There's a man who goes out of the Matrix too. He's Morpheus. Morpheus knows that the world where people live is a fake world. He goes back into the world of Matrix and finds Anderson, a computer programmer, and says,
"Hey, the world you live in now is a fake world created by the Matrix. Here are a red pill and a blue pill. If you take the red pill, you can go out of the Matrix. And if you take the blue pill, you stay in the Matrix forever. You have to choose one."
Eventually, Anderson chooses the red pill and goes out of the Matrix. Out of the Matrix, Anderson can't get used to the real world at first. Only after some time, he sees the real world. It's a world like this. A world of ruins completely blocked of the sun. This is the real world. Just as the world inside the cave is a fake world and the world outside of the cave is a real world, the world inside the Matrix is a fake one, and the world outside of the Matrix is the real one. And the man who broke out of the cave is Morpheus. The man in the cave failed to take others out of the cave with him. But in the Matrix, Morpheus succeeded in taking Neo outside the Matrix with him. In the allegory of the cave, we can see 5 forms of being. First, the shadow that prisoners in the cave are looking at. The models of things in the cave. Shadows of things outside the cave. The real things outside the cave. And the sun. Here, the shadows and models in the cave are fake, and the shadows, objects, and the sun are real. Like this, Plato says there's a hierarchy of things that exist. The closer it is to the sun, the more real it is. And the closer it is to the shadows in the cave, the more fake it is. For instance, think about the shadows and the models in the cave. Without the models, the shadows can't exist. But the models can exist without the shadows. In other words, the shadows are dependent on the models. So the models are more real than the shadows. And it's the same outside the cave. A shadow can exist only when there is an object. So the objects are more real. But the objects and shadows cannot be seen without the sun. All of these things are dependent on the sun. So the sun is the most real thing. Let's associate this with the world we live in. First, images that we see, like paintings and movies, are like shadows that the prisoners see. These are fake. And this world that we see with our own senses is just a model in the cave. This model is more real than shadows, but it's still fake. The end result is that the world we see with our senses is fake. The real thing is outside the cave. The concept of things outside the cave is real. For example, Michael Jackson is a human and Ariana Grande is a human. They look different, but they're both men. The reason why these individuals can be called human is that there's a concept of men. There are apples and bags here. They're both red. The reason we can say that these individual objects are red is because there's a concept of redness. These concepts really do exist. But how can these concepts exist? That's because ideas exist. Because there's an idea of men, there can be a concept of men. There can be a concept of redness because there's an idea of redness. There are even things like the idea of justice and the idea of love. These are the objects outside the cave. The things outside the cave are the ideas. So is there a hierarchy among these ideas? There's the idea of ideas. That's the idea of good. Because there's an idea of good, other ideas exist. The idea of good is the idea of ideas. Just as you can see the things with the sun, you need the idea of good to have other ideas. We said earlier that Whitehead said that Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato. In other words, Western philosophy proceeded in this framework created by Plato, in a dualistic framework that distinguished the fake reality from the real world of ideas. If you compare philosophy to chess, Plato made the rules of chess. So after Plato, Western philosophy has been fighting over who would win the game of chess. Plato's dualistic framework exquisitely matched the Christian thought. It's the same as the Christian framework that the kingdom of God is real and the kingdoms of this world are fake. So some people jokingly say that people took out an O out of Plato's idea of good, that is the idea of good, and made what Christianity calls God. In this dualistic framework, teleology emerged. The purpose of the fake is to be real. The reality should strive to be idealistic. And then the dialectics emerge. Fake becomes real through a dialectical process. And reality becomes ideal through a dialectical process. This teleology and dialectics became themes that appear repeatedly in the history of Western philosophy. Let's wrap up. First, through the allegory of the cave, Plato presented a dualistic framework of the world we live in and the world of ideas, the real and the fake, the sensible world and the intelligible world. Second, Plato believed that the world we live in exists because ideas exist. The human beings in this world exist because the idea of men exists. And the idea of ideas is the idea of good. Third, Plato's dualistic framework impacted all of Western philosophy.